Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Juan Cotto touching bases with you with my good friend from Terra Firma Consulting and a man who we're going to find it very difficult to find things to talk about over the next few segments. Bill Phillips, welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio and welcome to Juan on Rainier.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to see you. I just talking to you, I don't even know where to start. It has been such an amazing...
Amazing is one word for it.
It has been just really since January 20th, and we're not talking about Rainier Avenue Radio at the Garfield High School Martin Luther King Day events. We're talking about all that has happened, all that has transpired. Seems like it's just too many things to recount. However, politics never disappoints, does it?
No, it doesn't, especially now. We're only in week 3 of this new administration, and government's already halfway broken. So, yeah, it's definitely been an interesting time.
Bill will indulge us at the state, local, federal level, but he will give us some opinions. I want to let me muse with you for a second,
Sure.
Okay? Because and I want to start off with the statewide conversation, just off the top of my head. And I have so much respect for Senator Jamie Pedersen, who is a remarkable public servant. He is our 43rd district legislator. He oversees Bloodworks Northwest. He's been very supportive of work that we've done in Olympia. He's also someone we had just a very emotional conversation several years ago. I want to say that goes back to 2019. When we were looking at expanding the donor rolls in the blood supply. And at that time, gay men could not give blood. MSM, men who have sex with men, could not give blood. And we thought it is such a, we test blood now for 18 different viruses and vaccines. We know what's in your blood from a viral perspective, from a health perspective. And we think it's so important, putting in a shameless plug for blood donation. But one of the things that we wanted to do, and our president at the time, Jim Abishon, for his legacy, was to figure out a way that we can expand the donor rolls to include gay males. We believe that there was a percentage of them donating anyway because the testing was so good. But it had nothing to do with public sentiment. It was now with the FDA. And Jamie and I had a conversation, and he was like, Juan, when? And just to understand how that impacted us. And we just a really good conversation about, have a ton of respect for him. The situation with the schools,
yeah.
and you commented on it, and I read your comments on Facebook, and I was hoping that you would walk us through this, okay? Because as a parent, and I have made the choice, and the audience knows this from my other shows, I have made the choice. My children have been in private school. Mm-hmm. We know what happens to our kids in private school.
Yes.
And it from a harassment standpoint, from a child conflict standpoint, from a variety of different things, we know what goes on, and that's the standard that the parents at this particular school have. It's also a standard that we're paying for out of our pocket. Public schools, and the conversation in the bill last week, and there's more to it, obviously, and with Jamie being an attorney, understanding the legalities and the aspects of it of a large public institution. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah, I'm not an attorney, right? I'm not a policy analyst. Right. I'm not an Olympia, but I can give you my understanding of it because I did read the current RCW, and the current RCW says that if a child is found to have been the victim of a criminal act, then the parents will be notified about that. The problem is school staff are not the finders of fact as to whether a criminal act took place, right? So if they notify the parents prematurely and give them details that are not quite ready for prime time, that could actually harm the case against the bad actor who performed the criminal act. So you need to keep everything tight. The notifications have to follow a certain format. You don't want some defense attorney arguing that because a parent was told this and that was prejudicial, that this got said, and now that fairness can't exist. So the idea of having law enforcement notified first, and then giving details to parents as they come in and as facts are established would seem to make sense to me. Now, politically, that is a very difficult position to explain, right?
Let me ask you this question. So, okay, the number that was discussed, the allotment of time was 48 hours. When the child comes home, do they not say anything to the parents? How does that work?
You can say that something happened. You can say that it's under investigation. You can't name names and say exactly what happened. Parents can certainly talk to the child and get their take on what happened. That can certainly come about. But you don't want to do anything that is going to make it any more difficult to convict a criminal in a court of law.
So Travis Couture, who is he's a senator, Senator Travis, or is it Representative Travis Couture? He's the one that proposed this legislation in the Education Committee, and I believe it was voted down, which created, once again, the turmoil. And we'll go into that in regards to social media and the conversations and the shouting back and forth between the Ari Hoffmans of the world and different folks. And then Senator Pedersen goes on. He goes on Fox News, and that obviously throws a little bit of kerosene on a match, and things start to expand. So. But let's go back to this for a second. So, from a legal standpoint, and neither of us being attorneys, one being a policy analyst, but not having had a chance to really go into this situation, if I am a conservative, and if I am Travis Couture, and I am saying that we just want the parents to know immediately. Tell us what that's breaking down in regards to the aspect of
what you're doing. If you say you want the parents to know immediately, and that includes names and what happened in times and specifics, if you want that, I can certainly understand wanting that, but having that knowledge, and then that parent goes out into the community and says things that could be prejudicial to the case, so that it makes it harder to convict the person who did these things to a child. And the amendment was voted down because it was redundant, right? There's already a notification process that is prescribed in state law. But if you're MAGA, if you're looking to create wedge issues and you're looking to start a political firestorm, especially in a blue state like this, right? Because this is what you do. If you're MAGA, you find an issue that resonates with people, and then you generate some anger, some rage, and then you get to throw the bums out. And this is something to seize on in that regard. And I think it's incumbent on us as listeners and as participators in the dialogue of public process that we not necessarily assume good faith long past the point where good faith is impossible, or a person would be saying different things.
On both sides, sometimes these get fanned up a little bit, and I'm just wondering from your perspective. And without it just seems like, once again, we go through the social media and we go through these people yelling back and forth at each other, which we eliminate here on Juan on Rainier. Looking at this from the perspective of a parent, okay, so if especially either one of my children. One is 17-year-old. One is 12 years old. I'm the kind of parent, and I'm a hyper parent. My wife is much more civilized. If something happens to one of her kids, she also tends to become a little sensitive. But the bottom line issue is, it sounds like from the perspective of the parent, the way it is being described, and also the way it's being portrayed from the conservative side, I guess, is that parents have no recourse, and that this is completely shows that we don't want the parents to know anything, right, which leads into other issues. And how do we pull that back together?
Well, first thing, understand, when you're talking about school staff, you're talking about people who have made the education of children, relating to children, helping children, giving children the tools that they need to succeed, their life's work. They are not going to keep parents in the dark on something like that. There is nothing barring school staff from calling and saying, hey, something happened. You can talk to your child about it. We are still gathering details. This is an outline of what we believe happened right now, and law enforcement is involved, without giving names and times and specifics, or acting like this has already been found out, right? Because you don't want the parent going out there and doing anything vigilante, number
Correct.
one. right? And number two,
yes, you're absolutely right.
Right.
Yes, because I think people know me well enough. I mean, I'm one of those parents that would do one of those types of routines. And you know, we were talking about in terms of generations. You know, my father, I couldn't even have imagined him going through something like this.
Right.
So in terms of the escalating the situation, certainly.
Right. So you don't want to escalate it, and you don't want to start rumors in the community that end up impeding someone's ability to get a fair trial, because defense will argue that in court. So if you're MAGA and you're looking to make political hay out of this, you aren't going to read the reason why the amendment was rejected. You aren't going to read the fact that it was redundant. You are going to say these liberals are trying to keep parents in the dark about what happens in school. And you get people so riled up and understandably emotional. I'm not upset with anybody who's mad at hearing that, because it's a very visceral thing. It's a guttural fear that parents have. But when you do that, the brain kind of turns off and you stop listening. And MAGA isn't about getting people to discuss things in good faith. MAGA is an ideology of rage. It is a corrosive rage. It is never satisfied. And once you can whip that rage up, people become very easy to manipulate. That's the goal.
You and I are both, I want to say, consultants, and we are asked opinions from a lot of our friends who are elected officials and judges and people who are who have their names in the media constantly. And once again, we both, I believe you know Senator Pedersen.
Yeah.
As do I. I would have advised him not to go on to Fox News. I just looking at the situation and seeing it and how it is how it has come out the last couple of days. I would have said, Senator Peterson, let's think about this and let's not do it. Let's let the weekend go by but he made the decision, and I'm not sure who he is getting his advice from. What were your thoughts when you saw the information come out and the conversation that is ensued?
You know, I think if I were the consultant in that case, and they came to me and they said, "Hey, Fox wants me to go on and talk about this," you know, first thing I would do is make very clear that they understood that this was likely a trap. The problem is refusing to go on is also a trap. Right. The right is very good at setting up situations where heads I win, tails you lose. If you go, then you're defending this horrible policy that is endangering children and keeping parents in the dark. And if you don't go, you don't even have the courage to show up and defend what you're doing. There's no good faith there. There's no explanation that they're looking for. When an outlet like Fox has somebody like that on, they aren't looking for common ground and understanding or to learn what was going on. They are looking for that outrage component. It's their raison d'etre. It's why they exist.
The conversation now goes. I mean, it's not. There were other senators. There were other senators who spoke out against the bill.
Yes.
There were other senators who and representatives who also discussed the bill. Is a strategy of MAGA in your mind? Is a strategy of MAGA to see? Wait a minute. There's Senator Jamie Pedersen, openly gay legislator.
Absolutely, it all plays into it because the narrative that they've created. Well, think about it. Think about where we are now in terms of trust in government. It's at an all-time low. There has been an over half-century effort by what is now MAGA, what used to be conservatives and then radical conservatives and now MAGA, which has kind of swept over the entire GOP, undermining confidence in government, convincing citizens that it doesn't work, convincing them that their tax dollars are being wasted, creating apathy, creating anger. And why? So that when they finally get a president in office with all the tools in place to make it happen, they can start dismantling the bureaucratic structure that protects our democracy. And they can start using that rage to take action and have the country, half of them against it, half of them not really knowing what to think, but a good chunk of them just happy to see something being done. And that has been done methodically ever since Ronald Reagan said the scariest words of the English language, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." When he said that, he was crystallizing the hatred and fear and loathing that people have for government. And that process of tearing down was beginning.
But I tell you, going back, and I remember that I was young back then. Just certainly remember those times and the conversations about the government. Boy, it just seems like this is amped up so much. I mean, from Ronald Reagan and George Bush as the president and vice president, and supply side economics, and David Stockwell and all these different guys that they had. David Stockman, excuse me, who was the budget director, and this whole new language it seemed, and we're in cutting taxes and creating the jobs and the different things that supply side economics were supposed to do, and having that conversation for 8 years, and the impacts that it had on our community, and the conversations around at that time affirmative action and different ways that we can stimulate the economy and stimulate jobs and so forth, to today is just unbelievable to my mind. And I just how did we get to this point?
Well, we got there very methodically, right? And now that they've got the red state majorities kind of solidified behind them, they can start looking to create these kind of wedges in blue states like ours. You mentioned DEI. Let me take a tour here of DEI and how it started. And I grew up in Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
right? I went to LSU. I was there for the dawn of what would become MAGA. I mean, Mike Johnson and I used to debate in front of the student union at LSU, right? We were there at the same time.
Wow.
And the DEI is a great illustration of how the GOP over time undermines, creates narratives, and then points to them as real later on. Segregationists did not want to hire people of color when Jim Crow was in its last days. They were like, I'm not hiring anybody who's not white. Forget about it. Civil Rights Act passed. And segregationists said, I'm still not hiring anybody who's not white. So affirmative action came along and said, yeah, if your community is broken up like this, your profession is broken up like this percentage has to be non-white. And then the segregationists flipped that argument on their head. And they said, well, if you're forcing me to hire people, they're tokens. And being a token is dehumanizing. So affirmative action dehumanizes people. So affirmative action is racist. And they said that in enough courts for enough years that affirmative action began to get gutted, absolutely gutted. It was replaced with DEI, which is an educational initiative. It is keeping equality at the forefront. It does not have quotas attached to it, but they used the affirmative action argument, and they pointed at people of color, and they said, that's a DEI hire. That's a DEI hire. What's the constant thread that runs through this? The default is white people are better at everything. So if you see someone of color, they must have gotten there through special privileges. They must have gotten there because you were going to get canceled if you didn't hire them. That's what's really racist. And to people that aren't steeped in that culture, people that didn't grow up with this, people that are just maybe voting for the first time or haven't really bothered to look into how this works, that makes sense to them. And that's how they do it on multiple issues. They create the narrative, then they point to things that they say prove the narrative, and then that becomes fact in public consciousness.
This is Bill Phillips. He is a political consultant, Terra Firma Consulting, and he is spilling it. He is sharing his feelings and emotions with us today on Juan on Rainier. Thank you so much for being here. Rainier Avenue Radio coming up, the Call to Conscious Black History Museum. Bill and I walked through it to get over here, and Tony B has done it again. If you want to learn about the Black history in Seattle, and if you want to see, if you love sports, which I do, I mean, I could have stayed out there another hour and just looked at all the pictures and things that he's collected and where he's collected them from. I have no idea, and I'm probably going to take Tara Davis's letter jacket home. The Rainier Beach Star, and now the director or assistant director of athletics for the Seattle Public Schools. But this museum is awesome, Tony. The job well done. Call to Conscience. It's we are in the 11th day of this, and we have 17 more days to go. Bring your family down, and you will really enjoy it. It is from 11 to 7. Is that correct? Let me see up there. Yes, it is from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. The tickets are at calltoconscience.world. but please come bring your family. I think you'll really enjoy it. You'll learn something. You'll be impressed. And of course, we have Metro League basketball coming up. The February Madness here in the state of Washington, live Valentine's Day basketball. And I don't think Juan Cotto would have allowed me to do it. So Tony B, Tony B, you single guys, have fun. Bill Ellaby and Tony B, enjoy your Valentine's Day basketball. The girls' game is going to be at 6 p.m. And I believe that the girls' game, could you flash that back for me again? The girls' game is going to be, thank you. That's going to be, I believe, Lakeside versus Eastside Catholic. And then we have Lakeside versus Eastside Catholic, and we also have Roosevelt versus Garfield. I have called, Daniel Bellis and I, we have probably done 30 or 40 women's or girls basketball games here over the last several years, and we've called regular season and playoff games. If you want to see fantastic basketball, the Metro League basketball is the best basketball in the country for girls basketball. And I, with all due respect to Caitlin Clark and what you see in the WNBA, the best basketball in the country and the most intense rivalries are in the Seattle Metro League. And so come and spend some time. If you can't go to a ball game, and if you have young children, if your daughters that like basketball, go take them to see a Seattle Metro League basketball game. And then on the boys' side, a Friday evening at 8 p.m., we have O'Day and Garfield, Rainier Beach, and Prep. And obviously those schools are once again for the top teams in the state. So a combination of those teams will be in the final 8 teams in the state of Washington, and the Metro League is where they want to get those bragging rights. And what makes this tournament important for seeding is one of those teams wants to come out of there with that number 1 seed, so they have a little bit of an easier time massaging themselves to the state championship. But there'll be a lot of outstanding action this weekend. So if you can't go watch it in person, you have the next best thing, Rainier Avenue Radio. Bill, how did you get your start in all of this?
Oh, my goodness.
Why? I was thinking about that this morning when I was walking to Olympia to testify on my bill. How did we get our start in this?
For myself, and I'm going to share more publicly here than I've ever shared.
Please.
Publicly. I was raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses faith, right? Which is part of the reason I don't like doorbelling today, because I had to do that as a kid. Knocking on doors.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
Yeah.
Let me stop with that for you. At Western Oregon State College, one of my neighbors who was a football player threw coffee on the Jehovah's Witness, and the Jehovah's Witnesses came over to we had a little trailer. My longtime roommate, Doug Weber, and I, Doug, I hope you're doing well, came over with coffee spilled on them. I gave him a towel, sat him down, and they were kind of shocked and frustrated. And I told them I'm a Roman Catholic, grew up in the Catholic Church, but I'd never studied any other religions. Tell me about your religion. What when you say you are a Jehovah's Witness?
I'm not.
When one says they are a Jehovah's Witness,
what are they talking about? Well, first of all, they don't believe that there's a hell as we know it. They don't believe that there is an afterlife. They believe that 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses are going to get called up to go live with heaven after they die. Everybody else is going to be in a paradise earth. The key for me here, and the reason I bring up the whole dreary thing, is part of that ideology is we are not part of Earth's political system, because we are waiting for God to come and change everything into a paradise. And God is our king. Jehovah is our king. And so we don't take any part in politics. So we didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance. I couldn't stand for the national anthem as a child. It was against the religion to register to vote. They didn't celebrate Christmas or holidays or anything like that. But the impact of those beliefs was clear to me as a child, because this was the early 70s, which meant that there were people around for the horrors of World War II. And Jehovah's Witnesses were one of the groups that was sent to the concentration camps in Germany. They had purple and they had IBV on their uniforms, because that was their German name. And some of the survivors used to come to the kingdom halls, to the congregations, and they would talk to us about their experiences in the camps. And there were articles in the Jehovah's Witnesses publication written about what would happen. And I became obsessed with how does this happen? Why doesn't anyone stop? What do you mean you were neutral? You could have done, and what? And so as a kid, I started reading everything I could get my hands. I read Rise and Fall of the Third Reich at 13 years old, right? And I decided that somehow, some way, I had to get involved in politics or this could happen again. And here we are today.
Tell me your pathway. What was your first gig?
My first political gig. That would have been when I was 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and we were given a school project on the election between Reagan and Carter.
Wow.
And we had to make poster boards of each candidate. It was very fair. We had to do it with each candidate and their platforms. And then we had to talk about which one that we agreed with more and why. There was no like pointing to it or anything like you were free to visit the campaign headquarters, pick up the literature. You could say whatever you wanted. You were graded on your understanding of the topic, not the opinion that you had. And when I looked at Carter's beliefs and things Carter had said and written and done, and I compared those to what Reagan had written and said and done, I was 14 years old, and I knew I didn't want to be on Reagan's side of things. I wanted to be over here with Jimmy Carter's side. And so that's when I first started considering myself a Democrat 4 years before I was old enough to vote. When I started LSU, a little late. I started in 1987.
And I'm sorry, where you grew up in where?
I was born in New Orleans East at Methodist Hospital in New Orleans East. And I lived in Kenner, Louisiana. I lived in Slidell for a while. And I went to LSU in Baton Rouge. Tell me about the experience in Baton Rouge at LSU. Boy, if I'd have known I was at the dawn of the MAGA movement, but I had no way of knowing. It was 1987. I got involved in the presidential politics. The first candidate that I backed was Paul Tsongas in the 1988 race. I was a big Tsongas supporter. There you go.
Love Paul Tsongas.
I was 22 at the time. Like I said, I started LSU late. But I was 22 at the time with Paul Tsongas. Then I jumped onto the Mike Dukakis bandwagon when it was clear he was going to win. Mm-hmm. And we had buttons with the state of Louisiana and Dukakis. I believe that like he was going to win Louisiana, which he was never going to win Louisiana. Secret. And that was fun. But where it really started to hit home for me was 3 years later, because Louisiana does their gubernatorial elections in odd years. And in 1991, the candidates that came out of Louisiana's open primary, and they're a top two state. They were at the time too. They were top two state. Top two candidates go on, regardless of party, much like we do here in Washington today. Mm-hmm. The top two candidates that made it out of that primary were Edwin Edwards, who had been indicted and tried for fraud the last time that he was governor. He was acquitted. And the person that made it out of the primary with him was David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke. We had bumper stickers that said, "Vote for the crook, it's important."
We are going to go. We hold that thought. Hold that thought. We are going to go to a break, and we will come back in 3 minutes with Bill Phillips, Terra Firma Consulting, on your political radio, on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. Check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio .world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
Sediment cleanup of the lower Duwamish River has begun. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the members of the Lower Duwamish Waterway Group, which includes King County, the City of Seattle, and Boeing, have begun sediment cleanup of the Lower Duwamish Waterfall Superfund site. This important environmental project will address sediment pollution and help restore the health of the Duwamish River. Starting on the waterway's upper reach, construction activities extend from the South 102nd Street Bridge down straight to the Duwamish Waterway Park. Over the next 3 years, in-water activities will occur from October to February, ending in February 2027. Visit ldwg.org to learn about the upper reach cleanup and sign up for email updates.
Hey, Seattle, tune in to Lidline Sports every Monday, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
What up, yo? We are back. This is Pep, and the man that don't take no mess, Mr. O.B.I.S., Mr. Stevenson. What say you?
I hope you see the hat that I'm wearing right now. That's how mad I am.
I do. Man, you are angry.
I just want to make that be known.
Tune in to Lidline Sports every Monday, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Midline Sports.
What's up, everyone? It's your girl, Queen Bree, inviting you to come join me on Clean Greens Living. Broadcasted Tuesdays, 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, live right here on Rainier Avenue Radio. On Clean Greens Living, we talk farming, community, and ways to being healthy. So come join me and let's discuss ways to create a healthier you and a healthier community.
If you or a family member are 55 or over and need nursing home level care, but want to keep living where you are, check out Providence Elder Place PACE. This program offers healthcare, housing, transportation, and recreational activities. There are no copays or deductibles, and it's covered through Medicare and Medicaid. Providence Elder Place PACE works to keep you healthy and in your home. Call 206-320-5325 or visit providence.org Elder Place. Providence.org Elder Place.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rainier Avenue Radio .world, the station that cares about our community. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Juan Cotto, touching bases with you, or whatever time that you're watching this. You could probably be watching it at 2 o'clock in the morning. I routinely do my dishes at 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure that we have everything put in place and run the dishwasher so we can get everything going. We have a teenager. Geez, I can't believe my daughter's 11, but she's 30. And so it's my son's 17. So I keep saying, I keep thinking, and she's 11, but I'm like, God, she's like I almost want to say that I have 2 teenagers, but I'm not quite there yet. But just a late start. That's what happens when you have a late start. So you end up doing the dishes at 1 o'clock in the morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Bill Phillips with us from Terra Firma Consulting, and a political communicator, a person who has worked with judges, a person who has worked with elected officials, and getting them elected, and some of them we needed to get out of office, and he also helped get rid of some people that needed to be gone. On your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio .world. Before we get going, the Call to Conscious Black History Month Museum open all this month, Tuesdays through Friday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Tickets at calltoConscience.world. Bill and I walked through it before we started the show. Come and take a look at it. I think you'll really enjoy it. Educate your children, educate yourself about Black history in Seattle. And Tony's done a remarkable job as usual. This is one of the big events of the year over here at Rainier Avenue Radio. I think you should come check it out, and I always encourage you to do that, and I hope you do. Metro League Basketball, 3A high school basketball championships. Like I said before, it's going to be Valentine's Day Friday night. The girls are at 6 p.m. The boys are at 8. We have some of the best basketball in the country on the boys and girls level, but certainly Daniel and I did the Metro League, we did the district, and we did the state playoffs for the girls. I want to say that was 4 or 5 years ago. And unbelievable. Okay, I was thinking about the young woman, Katie Fiso from Garfield. We saw some tremendous players, and you're going to see some of the best basketball, if not the best high school basketball in the country, right here in Seattle. And I'll put my reputation on that. I don't think anyone would argue against that. Then, of course, the boys basketball is going to be at 8 o'clock. And the familiar names, O'Day, Garfield, Beach, and Prep, a combination of those 4 teams will be in the state championship. They'll reach the final 8, and they will be playing extra hard these next couple of tournaments here in the Metro League, simply because that's where the seeding happens. So it's an important tournament. They will be playing like it, and you'll see on the boys and the girls side some tremendous talent, and you'll see some tremendous basketball games. So we hope you get a chance. There's a Lakeside, Eastside, Catholic, Roosevelt, and Garfield. All 4 of those teams also will be highly rated, and they certainly will put on tremendous. And they see Roosevelt's got the number 1. Roosevelt has the number 1 seed in the tournament for the girls. So that'll obviously be a really good basketball game. Let's go back to your time at the Louisiana State University.
Yeah, and it was interesting because, like I said, in 1991, David Duke and Edwin Edwards came out of that primary. And David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, had marched around the LSU campus in a Nazi uniform. There was footage that was dug up of him in front of burning crosses, and all that was put on television. He got plastic surgery, had some work done on his face, had his jaw strengthened, and he used that to say that he had created changes. And once when he came out to speak, or he had personal changes, and once when he came out to speak at LSU, he said in front of this crowd at the student union, I've been through a lot of changes in my life. And I yelled, yeah, all that plastic surgery. Which was a line that actually made a book about that race by Joe McGinnis called Across to Bear, which is a great book. I don't even know if it's still in print, but if it is, check it out. And but the thing about it is when those ads went on, and they were put on by a group called the Louisiana Coalition Against Racism and Nazism, and when those ads went on the air, David Duke's numbers went up, not down. When President George Bush the Elder, when he came down and renounced David Duke and said, this is not a Republican, he was booed. And David Duke's support went up. The Louisiana Coalition Against Racism and Nazism decided to go another route. They put football players, sports personalities on television to say things like the New Orleans Saints. They would say, I want to live in a city, in a state where the black and gold and the black and white work together for the good of everyone. Now, in Southern speak, that is a very coded message, because what that player is saying is, if David Duke is elected, I'm not going to play football for the Saints. I'm going to go play somewhere else. And people for the first time started thinking of the impact that their vote would have. And in those last couple of weeks, the election flipped. There was a massive voter drive where voters of color were registered, where they sent buses out to bring people to the polls, massive Souls to the Polls movement. That combined with having some of the people that might have been attracted to David Duke's message start to think about the consequences of their vote should he win, shifted that election, and Edwin Edwards ended up taking 63% of the vote in that race. So that was my first experience watching what was basically let's just come out and say it. At that point, it's a Nazi message. Watching it refuted with real world consequences made a big impression on me. And I said, if you can frame and you can point to things that affect people, maybe when this kind of hatred gets ginned up, you can work on reversing it. And I kind of made that my passion, and I got involved in politics after working in the mental health field for a while. So sometimes it was a lateral move from mental health into politics. But that's been at the forefront of everything I've done in politics, is trying to help people understand that their political decisions have an impact on the lives of their community, on people they might not even know, and on themselves that they haven't thought about yet. And that's what I've been trying to do.
I want to ask you a question about politics of the South, because to me, the most chilling thing that I remember coming out of my youth was Governor George Wallace in the state of Alabama standing right at the door with the National Guard standing there, ordered by President Kennedy to be there. And George Wallace said, segregation now, segregation then, segregation forever.
Yep.
Are we witnessing going to the conversation with David Duke and Edwin Edwards? I remember that election, but do you feel it's like a pendulum, and it seems like it's every 30 years now, right? So we have that, and then something pushes the pendulum, and we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and we have moments where we're growing and evolving. Then we hit Edwin Edwards and David Duke, and you get some people starting to rebuild that again. Then it starts to slowly swing back, and we witness in our lifetime a black president. We witness a black female vice president running for president, and now it has swung back. Is that what we're seeing? Is it?
I don't know if it's swinging back so much as it's something that's always there, and there's a group of people that are very invested in giving it cover, giving it an excuse, letting it show. Like right now, you tell somebody that the Trump administration is being racist, and they're going to say, no, they're getting rid of the dead weight. They got all these DEI hires they're trying to get rid of. Well, who are they talking about? That's a segregationist argument. All you've done is changed the terms around, but the frame is exactly the same. There are people of color taking jobs from whites, and your tax dollars are being wasted, and they're not good. And we know that because they're people of color. And why else would they be there? It's the same thing. It's just got different words to it. I'll give you a local example from Louisiana in New Orleans. There was an amusement park called Pontchartrain Beach. And when it was whites only, everybody loved going there. After the Civil Rights Act, they integrated Pontchartrain Beach. So what happened? Well, white kids and white adults started picking on and roughing up people of color that went to the park, intimidating them, trying to get them to leave. So people of color started going in groups. And what they learned is if you mess with the bigots first, you'll get to go through the park unmolested, right? Unharassed. So the white people stop going, and then they say, the black gangs took it over. It's not safe for white people anymore. And that becomes the narrative. And that is what segregationism, that's what racism, that's what bigotry, that's what modern conservatism is very effective at doing. I'm not a racist. I am reacting to an injustice. I am reacting to the behavior of someone that I don't like. It's got nothing to do with racism, but it all is. And it's all segregation under a different name. And I saw it with my own eyes, so I know it's true.
And that leads us to another conversation that we have to have.
Yeah.
And I want to get your opinion on this. And my wife is a therapist. And once again, we're not only Catholic, we're practicing Catholics, and she's far better than I am. But my wife is a person who has the mental health bent, and it's interesting in regards to this conversation because I was a former head coach at Franklin High School, and I had a transgender athlete on my team, and the conversation over the last 3 weeks about the transgender in sports. And we had a conversation with Mick Hoffman, who usually I meet with on Tuesdays at 3:00. He's the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, and he followed the law last year. He followed the law, and he felt in his position with the WIAA, he had no other choice to follow the law, and he felt that the law certainly was prescribed, and he was able to allow transgender athletes to participate in all the events and venues, and a transgender athlete, I believe, won a state championship to much controversy, of course. But my wife and I have had this conversation around the mental health aspects of the transgender issue. We believe that there has got to be a way for transgender citizens to come into society, to feel comfortable in the society, and especially as in the younger phases, to figure out how the transgender person can basically evolve into a functioning citizen without the discrimination, without the hatred. And obviously, one of the biggest things for me as an evolving person was sports. Mm-hmm. And the ability to the ability to have participation in sports. Once again, this bill was recently signed, or this executive order, although it is being presented to us as a very, very popular order, and there were a number of young girls and women around the president when he signed it. I believe the conversation is far more broad than that.
It's more broad and it's more nuanced, and a lot of the opposition to it is rooted in good old-fashioned gender stereotypes. Men are brash, men are aggressive, men are powerful, men dominate women. Therefore, if I'm a man and I decide that I don't match my body, right? I look in the mirror, it doesn't feel right. It's not who I really am, and I decide to go public with that, then I must be doing it just because I want to abuse women, just because I want to hurt people. I want to use my strength. You can't get there if you're seeing every human being as equally valid. If you're seeing individuals for who they are as opposed to part of a group, it's very difficult to get there. So it messes with all kinds of perception. Now, I don't have studies that I can quote off the top of my head. I'm not a member of that community. I'm not trying to speak for them. I am simply talking about what I've noticed in other cishet white people when they talk about gender. it always comes down to that fear that women who are transgender are jealous of men and they want to become men, and men who want to be transgender are, that's the terminology that they use, men who are transgendered, men who want that to project that to the world. They just want to get over on women. They just want to do, and that's why they're able to use almost progressive sounding language in terms of protecting women and children, in terms of protecting the sacred spaces of women's sports. But again, if you're seeing everyone as a equally valid human being, you can't get there on the trans issue. You have to bring your gender stereotypes into it.
Is this a generational issue? Because it was funny, Bill, when I was at Franklin, and the athletic director sat me down when I first took the job, and our athletic director told me, Juan, the potential for a problem is going to exist. There is a transgender athlete that wants to participate. How do you feel about it? I said, you want to come out and play football? I said, if their parents aren't forcing them to play, they want to come out and play football, they can come out and play football. I'm going to coach them just like I'm going to coach them like any other player out there. So I thought about having a meeting, and I had a group of captains, and we had captains for each class, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I just didn't want to have captains from the senior class. I wanted to make sure leadership was established through the entire group. And I said, we have a transgender athlete that is going to participate. And they all looked at me and said, oh, we know them. It's not a problem. You don't have to have a special meeting.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. When you are seeing someone as an individual, as a human being, and when you know them, that's why they're okay. I know them. That's because you're now aware of their humanity and you're respecting their humanity, right? But I to be honest with you, just from talking to fellow white guys, I think 90% of it is, I don't want to buy a chick a drink in a bar and then find out I'm talking to a trans. That's what it is. They don't want to flirt with it. That's too gay. And it's really rooted in some nasty urges and some really base assumptions.
The conversation around the transgender today, and I was talking with a friend of mine. I said, you know what? When I was growing up here in the United, I grew up here, and I think you and I are similar age, early 1970s. It was real simple. It was black and white. I mean, that was most of the civil rights was issues.
Black and
Coming
white.
in the 90s, it was black. And my mother was a black woman who went to school at Garfield High School. My father was a dark-skinned Puerto Rican man who served in the Air Force. And from what he was telling me at Boeing and how they motivated us was, you guys are black men. You guys are young black boys. And if you don't do it twice as good, you're not. These white people are not going to let you work for them. And when we brought home a C or a D, they warned us that is going to really, really harm you. You have to do A or B level work. And it was just kind of drilled into us. And then it seems now there are so many more. As the country has evolved, the denominations evolved. It also seems that there are still, we talk about, especially if you saw your Facebook feed after the Super Bowl performance on Sunday, which is also generational, because I have no idea what that Super Bowl performance was about. I've read all the different things that explained it to me, and I still don't get it. But that wasn't a part of my upbringing. That wasn't a part of my life, and I didn't grow up in that type of culture. However, it meant something to someone.
It meant something to a lot of people.
And so you still have a black community that there's a component of race to it, and the MAGA touches on that. You have the LGBTQ community, and certainly the MAGA touches on that, and back and forth. You have now the transgender community, which I guess is part of the LGBTQ community. You have these just different. There seems to be, we have BIPOC and all of the other terminology. It seems that our country now seems to be almost inundated with this. And does this give the MAGA folks more to fear, or should this be an opportunity where it felt like in the 1970s was more conversation? Seemed like we were able to have more conversation. Seemed like through my adolescence and growing up, as I was starting to develop the frontal lobe in my brain, and obviously the male brain, it develops a lot slower. But it seems like we were having more conversations. We were having more community conversations. Even like now, it just seems like we're lobbing hand grenades back and forth at each other.
We are, but I would argue that gender has been part of the civil rights conversation from the very beginning. I mean, you go back to the theme song of All in the Family, and you knew who you were then. Boys were, or girls were girls, and men were men, right? It was always part of the Equal Rights Amendment, women's liberation, the bra burning. It was all tied in to that civil rights argument, which was primarily about color and opportunity for race. But what conservatism is very good at doing, and I give the devil his due here, they are good at telling a story, creating a narrative, and then pointing at examples until finally something clicks. And I'll give you an example of that recently, something that just about everybody listening saw happen with their own eyes. When Joe Biden was elected in 2020, after the coup attempt failed, the GOP, MAGA, started bashing him as incompetent, feeble, senile, unable to put a sentence together. And every time he made a speech, they would jump on every misstatement, every stumble. They would say, see. So by the time that first debate rolled around in 2024, Donald Trump got up there. He threw him off by saying whatever came to his head on any different topic, answering anything with the question, letting Joe Biden, who is a stutterer, had to think about how to put his words together carefully, had no chance of matching in tone and tempo. So even though after that debate, he went to a campaign event and he held court and he discoursed with voters and he talked very articulately on many different topics, the GOP was able to set that narrative up to the point where Claire McCaskill, after the debate, something needs to be done. I'm a Democrat, and we all saw what we saw. And that's an example of a narrative that was set up for years and years and years, finally being perceived. See, you can't deny it. And that's what the GOP does very well that we don't do. I like to say that in that moment, it was our assignment to say that was the best debate performance in history, because that's what the GOP did after Reagan flubbed his first debate. They didn't scream for Reagan to step aside. They said he was amazing and he got another chance. Biden never got another chance. Kamala Harris, amazing for stepping into a campaign with 100 days to go. Amazing job there. But when we talk about our messaging, it's not always on our leaders. It's on us as activists as well.
What happened to the centrist part of the Republican Party? And I say the part that they called the globalist. Okay, so I remember in 2016, Trump was, the George Bush and that crew. The second George Bush, well, and even Bush 1. They were not big fans of Donald Trump. And many of them did not endorse Donald Trump. And he felt it was this fight between the globalist Republicans, the limousine Republicans, and his new MAGA faction. How was he able to co-opt the whole party?
He won a lot.
Yes.
That's number one. And number two is neither faction. MAGA is big enough that it can do things pretty much on its own. The faction of the GOP that disagrees with MAGA is not large enough to do that. The faction of the Democratic Party that sees what's going on and that this is a time to kind of put together or put aside our little pet issues and put together a coalition that works with everyone. I like to say there's no such thing as Democrat and Republican anymore right now in practice. We have MAGA and people who aren't MAGA. Mm-hmm. And if that means that I have to welcome Dick Cheney into the tent to defeat MAGA, that's what I'm going to do. We can get back to arguing about foreign policy and marginal tax rates once democracy is secure again. But there are very few people willing to take that approach. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you look at things like the Lincoln Project, where Steve Schmidt and others have tried to work with the Democratic Party and been rebuffed, so they're off kind of doing their side thing. They've been drowned out by the voices on their side. And our coalition is still working on how to figure out a way to center everybody's issues enough so that they stay in the coalition while also appealing to the not MAGAs over on the right. And that is an almost impossible task. That's the problem we're having right now.
And what do you think will cement this? How can that be fixed?
But if I knew that, if I knew that, I would be charging for this interview.
No, so I'm gonna steal the answer and use it.
Yeah. I think that right now, what I would say to my fellow Democrats is, look outside of the issues that are important to you. And I get that maybe there's a pet issue that you have that's more important than anything else. There were a lot of people who didn't vote for Kamala Harris because they didn't like her position on Gaza. How's that working out for them? Now it's going to be open ethnic cleansing. He's going to knock everybody out of there and build a resort. Is that what you wanted to do? There are people who say, well, we had to get to this point so that people will rise up and throw them out, and then we can have a true government of the people, by the people, and for the people. To which I say, what is your historical example for that happening? Because my read of history is fascism comes in on votes, but it rarely leaves without tanks. That's what I see it in history. So my party, I would say, think about people who aren't in your bubble, think about people who aren't in your group, and think about how you're going to reach them.
Why does it seem it's been so hard after, I tell you, in 2008, that November night in 2008, I told several friends of mine who are Republican, I said, I think your party's done. How do you come back? How do you come back from this? I mean, you have this remarkable young, charismatic, young Black president with a beautiful family, everything going on. You have both chambers of the Senate and the House, and I told him, I said, you guys are on really, really, really thin ice. The Republican Party looks like it's almost gone.
And that would have been true had we pressed that advantage. But we were a victim of our own values, because we are not a party that takes power and then does things our way, whether people like it or not. When Barack Obama was reforming the healthcare system, he put Republican senators, Republican representatives in the room, brought them to the negotiating table, and he compromised with them. And in the end, what did they do? They got him to take out the public option. They got him to withdraw certain abortion funding pieces from the healthcare initiative, from the Affordable Care Act. And then they all voted against it anyway, with the exception of one Republican who had won in a Democratic district and was only there for one term anyway down in Louisiana. But other than that, they basically talked Barack Obama into gutting important pieces of his proposal, and then they all voted against it anyway. And they made a decision that no matter how much he tried to work together, they were going to stonewall and block him out of everything. They weaponized our values of inclusiveness, our desire to make sure that all points of view are respected. They weaponized that, and they used it to lock us out.
To make sure that we are not locked out of power, we are going to go to a break for 3 minutes, and we come back. We will finish up with Bill Phillips, Terra Firma Consulting, on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Ladies and gentlemen. Speak up, Seattle. We are Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the station that cares.
Don't forget.
This is an important message about coronavirus. With coronavirus still spreading, those who are most likely to get seriously ill must take extra precautions. You are at a higher risk for getting seriously ill if you are over 65 or if you have any serious underlying medical conditions, like heart disease, chronic lung disease, like asthma, diabetes, or if you're undergoing cancer treatment. If you're at a higher risk for getting seriously ill, it's essential you take extra care to protect yourself. Stay home, avoid close contact with others, wash your hands frequently with soap and water for 20 seconds, disinfect frequently touched objects like doorknobs and light switches. The choices you make are critical, and their impact is significant.
Hey, y'all, it's Traffic Jam with Kareem.
Thursday at 4 p.m.
Hey, Traffic Jam. Rainier Avenue Radio, download the app so you don't miss out what's popping, what's cracking, what's shining. It's your boy, Cream the Dream, on another beautiful week on here on Traffic Jam in Seattle. I hope you guys doing what you're supposed to do, being you're supposed to be. I got a good show for y'all, a lot to talk about, you know, Kareem the Dream, keep up with everything.
Get your entertainment news with Kareem on the Traffic Jam Thursday at 4 p.m.
This is Big Poppy, host of Jazz from the Cabinets. Join me each week for a listening tour of the first century of jazz, an eclectic mix of Dixieland, big band, cool jazz, bebop, contemporary jazz, world jazz, all jazz in all forms. That's Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy on Rainier Avenue Radio, streaming worldwide on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
A new law is helping people save more money on prescription drug costs. You may also be able to save with Medicare's Extra Help program. Your premium cost can be zero and your out-of-pocket expenses are low. Who should apply? Single individuals earning less than $23,000 a year or married couples earning less than $31,000 a year. Even if you don't think you qualify, you should still check out this program. Visit ssa.gov/extra help. Medicare costs are covered by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Rainier Avenue Radio.
That is one of my favorite lead-ins, is Tony B imitating the Rainier beer commercial. Had to be 1974, and the guy has Mount Rainier in the background. It's got to be near Puyallup somewhere. And you're Rainier. And I don't want to do a commercial for Rainier beer, but and it's still available, by the way. You can still get Rainier beer. But Tony B obviously grew up here, the Franklin Quaker, and he is the person who drives Rainier Avenue Radio, and we're so appreciative of him, and we love his sense of humor, and I'd love to hear him lead us in with that motorcycle call. And one of the calls that he has right now is the Calls of Conscience Black History Month Museum. You knew where you guys wonder where I was going with that. The Call to Conscience Black History Month Museum. It's open this month on Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Tickets at the Call to Conscience .world. Come check this out. It really is a history of Black Seattle. And like I said, Bill and I were walking through, and I was just fascinated by some of the exhibits that Tony. I wonder where Tony gets his stuff. It's like he walks into people's houses and just takes things and then brings them here. And then on the police blotter, they'll be looking for him. And for 1 month, they'll be gone. And then I believe he'll put them back. I believe you'll take them back, Tony. But no, it's in all due seriousness, and only because I love Tony so much. But he, what an incredible job that he has done. I was a little disappointed in the baseball, Tony. I'm going to send you my picture. Next year, I would like to have my Western Oregon baseball picture put in there, because I was one of a premier athlete who played college baseball in the state of Washington, albeit it was a little while ago. But it would be nice to have my picture up there. But then again, hey, I've got a radio show on Rainier Avenue Radio. So, Bill Phillips, thank you so much for being here. Love you, my brother. This is awesome, man. You've mentioned it a couple times. You've touched on it when you were at the Louisiana State University, where our former athletic director from the University of Washington is now currently, I believe he's still there. Mark, what's his face? His name will come to me in a second. Real interesting dude. But when you were at Louisiana State University, usually that was the birthplace of MAGA.
I believe it was. I believe I had a front row seat. And understand, I told you how I first got interested in politics back in 1980 as a freshman in high school. At that time, I moved up to Seattle to live with my father for a couple of years, my father and my stepmother. And so I went to Roosevelt High School for 2 years, and then I went back to Louisiana and did end up at LSU. And the reason I say it was the birthplace of MAGA was we had every Wednesday afternoon, the school would operate what they called Free Speech Alley. And it was in front of the LSU Student Union. And for a couple of hours, anybody could say anything that they wanted. So we had preachers go out. It was like Hyde Park.
Free Speech Alley,
they called it. Yes. And I started trundling down there every week, and I would get into debates and start arguing with various Republicans. One of the ones that I argued with frequently was a gentleman by the name of Mike Bayham, and Mike Bayham is still on my Facebook page.
B-A-A-M.
B-A-Y-H-A-M. Bayham. Mike Bayham. He is still on my Facebook page. He's on his best behavior because he's under notice. But we used to argue and debate, and his best friend, and one of his best political friends at LSU, was Mike Johnson, who was currently the Speaker of the U.S. House. And sometimes when Bayham wasn't there, I would debate with Mike Johnson, and I would hear them say things that were shocking to me then. For instance, once when we were arguing over cutting food stamp benefits, and I said that children would starve, literally starve. The answer to that from, I can't even remember if it was Bayham or Johnson, but the one I was debating with said to me, name a child that will starve without food stamps. Name them. Give me their name. Let me talk to their parents. Let me go to their church. Name one. That derision, that refusal to believe that anything that I'm not aware of could even possibly exist is a strain of thought that still runs through MAGA to this very day, which is why they believe things like FEMA abandoned North Carolina, which is absolute. I'm on public radio here, but think of the worst word for a lie you can think of. It's just absolutely that, because it fits their narrative. And they honed that practice at LSU. Mike Johnson and Mike Bayham were part of the Student Government Association at LSU. It was nothing but insults, derision, impeachments, chaos. The SGA of the early 1990s at LSU looked a lot like the White House today. So I don't know what was going on at other college campuses, but I know that I was in close contact with at least a couple of very early adopters of MAGA. And with that, combined with the fact that David Duke was an actual serious gubernatorial candidate, kind of feels like I was at the birthplace of the movement.
I guess the question I would have for that gentleman is you want to learn about the kid who has food stamps. We want to learn about who the black guys were that took the white guys' jobs.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Name a white guy who lost. Yeah. The problem is, Juan, they have white people that they know who will lie about it, who will tell you that they work for a company they never went to, who will tell you they lost their job to a person who never exists for a reason that never came up. That is what the right is willing to do, that the left is not. So when I hear, like I said, again, when I hear this talk about we don't know how to message, I made a Facebook post the other day and I said, most kids like candy better than broccoli. What is broccoli doing wrong with its messaging? Why can't broccoli convince children to like it? Broccoli is so much better for them. When they eat candy, they're eating against their own best interest. How come broccoli? What is wrong with our vegetable farmers? How come they're not messaging better? This must be their fault. MAGA sells candy. MAGA sells political candy. They sell hatred. They sell easy irritation. They sell easy answers to life's problems. We are political broccoli because we're community-based solutions. We are evidence-based. We take time to compile facts and act based on those facts. It's nothing to do with messaging. It has to do with candy is easier to swallow than broccoli.
The city of Seattle we are going to be moving to an election year, a very, very interesting election year. We have a mayor up who is running unopposed. Still has the guy running around on the internet that has Bruce's promises up. Saw Bruce's promises, and I think Bruce is now with 32% of his promises or something like that. We have Sarah Nelson. She's running again, backed by business. We have a young woman by the name of Alexis Mercedes Rink, who last year completely blew out Tanya Wu, who was the council's appointment to that particular Seattle City Council, the open seat position. And I believe Miss Mercedes Rink won by almost 16, 17 points. We have Tammy Morales stepped down. Mark Solomon stepped in, and anyone that knows Mark, and talking about narratives, anyone that knows Mark realizes he's not like this former police officer, roll up his sleeves and then carried a gun. Mark did community service work in the city, and then has influenced so many young people. And when they started that whole community service program with the Seattle Police. I would not characterize Mark Solomon as this rough and tumble law and order guy. He's someone who has definitely been out there. His name has been out there. His legacy has been out there. And I saw the emotion when he was appointed a couple of weeks ago to the Seattle City Council. And this is something that he has always wanted to be. And for now, the next 9 months, and he's not going to run. He's a caretaker. The council agreed to a caretaker. And I think what Mark will learn is any inclination of him even thinking about running for that seat, he'll do this job now for 9 months and then be so thankful he'll get out of there in 9 months. And at least that's what I think will happen to him. But there'll be a new council member there. And the city, and we've seen it, you've seen it from a distance, the challenges the city faced with a decaying downtown core, with a variety of different problems going on in it. And it has been very, very difficult to attract businesses to come down. Obviously, we're in a tech city, so if your business made the decision to work at home, and like ours did, our administrators all work at home. Our president lives on Bainbridge Island. He says, I'm not coming in every day. I'm capturing that time back. And a number of businesses had a very, very difficult time making the adjustment to come back downtown. Finally, Amazon and some of the other major businesses downtown decided to come back, and they're starting to reinvigorate the downtown core. But certainly we have a homeless situation. We have some drug problems going on downtown. We have a variety of different issues around transportation. And now we have a federal government that say we're holding back all dollars. The impacts of all of this on the local level. And what are your thoughts about what's going on in the city of Seattle, and what are the challenges that urban officials have to look at in these what used to be economic powerhouses we called cities?
Yeah, a lot of that is changing, right? A lot of that it's shifting around. The priorities are different now. And part of that is because there is a singular focus. Again, I hate to keep going back to MAGA, but there is a singular focus on bringing up issues that are problematic in cities, that can get people divided, get people angry. Everything that you were talking about, issues of very serious study, they will figure out a way to break them into talking points and divide people over them. And I think that we need officials who not only know how to run the city, but are aware that that kind of propaganda war is kind of going on in the background, right? And so they're going to be there with the promises not kept and all the things that you do in a race. But it would also be a good idea to keep track of how those factoids might be spun by someone who maybe doesn't have Seattle's best interests at heart, and come up with what you'll say if you start to hear that weaponized. Because the Democratic Party, for better or for worse, made a strategy in the state of Washington that they were going to continue to build up the blue vote in areas like the city and suburbs of Seattle, and they would argue with me for saying this, but you can't argue with what people tell you when you talk to them, essentially ignoring more rural areas of the state that just got more and more and more red. The problem with that is you can only build your blue tower so high before those red fences start to come in. Right. And it's getting late to go reverse that. But now and the reason that this comes back to what you were talking about is because that has created kind of a Jenga brick to pull out. So if you can get the activists angry at each other, and if you can start talking about different issues in ways that enrage people, you can start peeling off some of that Democratic vote, so that when you get into the partisan stuff, you can peel off some to the Republican Party. And if you can peel enough off in Seattle, Washington can go red. We are not guaranteed to be a blue state.
No, that's interesting, and let me go to an issue, and I want to come back to that. I want to challenge that a little bit, but an issue that is incredibly controversial, and an issue that definitely impacts the rural eastern side, and also the Seattle side, the urban side, is the issue around immigration. Had Governor Ferguson last week, and he was up at El Centro de la Raza, where I'm on the board, and he really talked about the protection of undocumented, and without going into the fundamentals and the policy areas around a sanctuary city and sanctuary organizations, it basically close enough. I mean, he's going to make sure that people are protected. And from a variety of things that came out of Washington, D.C. in the last couple of weeks. On the rural side, it's interesting, right? Because a lot of the MAGA folks depend upon some undocumented to pick those crops and fields out there. And I was thinking about that as I was listening to conversation around this particular subject matter. The immigration issue and the challenges that we're faced with that. Tell us in regards to this these executive orders that we've seen and the gentle balance that we have in regards to this.
I expect that at some point there will be very public showdowns between military or paramilitary forces and city officials who are trying to protect immigrants, whether it's here or Chicago or another American city. They are going to want that tableau, right? They were going to want to show that, look at how we're trying to keep you safe from these immigrants. And when we were talking about the thread of supremacy and the thread of segregation that runs through everything. Notice they're not going after the employers. They're not going after people who hire workers without documentation. They're going after the workers themselves. Now, it seems to me it would be more efficient to make people afraid to hire them than it is to go persecute them all. But that's not the intent. They're not trying to stop immigration. They're looking for a wedge issue.
Now, let's go back to the premises. Washington State, where we saw who was the gentleman, the sheriff from over in, I believe it was Pullman, and he ran against Jay Inslee in 2020.
Lauren Culp.
Yeah. So, I thought then. I mean, that was the litmus test for me. You could put anybody's name on there. You could put Bill Phillips R versus a Democrat, and it's going to be 60-40, 61-39. Give me the scenario where a Republican can win statewide.
Republican can win statewide, number one, by convincing everyone in Seattle. If you think Seattle can't go right, I would argue their city council has gone right. Their city prosecutor has gone right just in the last couple of election cycles. That's the beginning of a process. So you start by, instead of doing the traditional thing, if you're a Republican strategist here, they're not giving you ideas. But you're looking to buck that, and you're looking to create new narratives, and you're looking to peel that vote off in Seattle because that's where the weakness is. I mean, our strongest point is also our weakest. And if you could convince people that Seattle is a hellhole and that it's embarrassing, and they're being laughed at, and you get people to vote for more right-wing policies, especially as they start to work a little bit, or maybe they're not working, but they're being sold as though they're working. That's how you start the process. I don't know if it can happen in a cycle or two, but remember, as recently as, well, I guess it's not 31 years ago, but 31 years ago, the entire state went red. The entire state went red. We lost the legislature. We lost the speaker of the flipping house. We had the speaker of the house, and people in Eastern Washington who voted for George Nethercutt over Tom Foley, right. They thought that the speakership was just going to go right back to them because there's a lack of civics knowledge. And when you're willing to say anything that it takes to win and do anything that it takes to win, there's no area that is safe from that. So if I was a Republican, and I'm looking to turn it to red, I'm looking to start as many tax fights, as many fights about child health, as many fights about crime as I possibly can, because the more people are at each other's throats, the more likely it is Washington falls to MAGA.
What are the major issues that you're seeing that obviously the Republican Party right now is in the minority?
Yep.
They have been, on certain issues that I'm working on, they've been great to work with, very, very reasonable, and have definitely carried things not only to the line but through the line, and have been and Washington State also, and it was referenced this morning. With Claire Wilson and Lisa Wellman sitting right next to Paul Harris from down in Southwest Washington, and Paul, by reputation, a Republican and a moderate to conservative Republican, but definitely reaches across the aisle. tell us down at Olympia, what are the key issues that you've been following down there, and what we can expect for the rest of this session coming up?
I think number one, I think Jay Inslee took a lot of people off guard with his opening speech when he talked about the budget and his priorities of government, and that he would not be advocating for much in the way of new revenue, and in fact would be looking for cuts. That was, in my view anyway, a brilliant chess move, because instead of giving a bunch of red meat for conservatives and MAGA to attack, he instead said something that MAGA was kind of going to be, all right, maybe that makes sense, and then was going to cause a lot of angst in the Democratic Party. And as a political move, it's brilliant, because anytime that you're getting your caucus to collaboratively talk about issues and real solutions while depriving the propaganda side of the GOP of any easy wins in that department, was a good move. So I said at that point, when I saw that, I said, well, Bob might know what he's doing here. And I think that MAGA is trying to find an end. We talked about the school thing, crime and safety, police power, another big fight down there. And they're doing a good job so far of not giving MAGA that grist.
Do you find it interesting? I thought it was interesting. I received a note from the governor's office today. I don't know if you saw the email that Brianna Aho has sent out, and her name is becoming quite familiar if you are on any of those different things. She is the communications director for the governor, our new governor, Bob Ferguson, here in the state of Washington. But the test today, it's almost like he hasn't stopped being Attorney General.
Right.
I believe that he won a case was won, or I can't remember how it was phrased exactly. Probably read off my phone, but he was able to get $160,000 back for the workers at an auto parts store. But I was like, that's what you used to do in the Attorney General's office. You're bringing the Attorney General's work. Are you bringing the Attorney General's work over to the governor's office?
If he is, and it's that tangible, and it's something that can be sold in a talking point, I'm all for it. Right? But one thing that we need to get better at as a party, and that's everybody in our party, is trumpeting our successes and pointing out real examples and not talking about them from an analytical standpoint. If Democrats pass a bill that means that I can turn my lemon car in and get a new one, they need to put me in a commercial talking about my experience and how it really helped me to do that, instead of dry numbers and talking about the stat sheets, right? Because we do too much of that in the Democratic Party. And I think Bob gets that. So when he talks about these programs and things that he has done, these victories that he has had, he knows that it is making an impact on the audience, and he knows that it's relatable and it's not just a bunch of analysis. Somebody said that the Republican Party is an emotional party and Democrats are an analytical one, and emotion wins most arguments with voters. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of truth to that. And so I see Bob kind of tuning into that a little bit, and hopefully that continues.
I have a friend who helps me with my work down in Olympia, and he says he's not a Republican. He likes to consider himself a moderate. I consider myself a radical moderate. I still think he's conservative, but we butt that one back and forth. Let me ask you this: he believes that Bob Ferguson, Governor Ferguson, mm-hmm. has started off a little bit more conservative because he wants to get his name in the presidential ring for 2028. And it seemed the Democratic Party was a little bit more clear 8-9 years ago. Now it is. I received an email yesterday from Josh Shapiro, who is helping raise money. I'm receiving from other Democrats across the country. I haven't heard from Vice President Harris yet. Maybe in a year or two we will.
Yeah, it's a little early.
As you start to kind of get away from and distance yourself from everything. What are your early senses for 2028? And just throwing it out there. I mean, shouldn't be thinking about 2028 right now, but hey, why not?
Let me say something. Let me say something about Bob here. I think Bob is too much of a chess player to think that moving right is the way to win a Democratic primary. I don't think he's looking at, especially when it's been demonstrated that you can run as far to the left as you want in the primary and then tack back to the center in ways that aren't even going to push up many eyebrows in this era of presidential politics. So I don't think he's doing it for presidential gain. I think he is genuinely strategizing because he kind of sees that field where MAGA just needs an opening, and what we have here in Washington becomes just another red state. And I think he's trying to prevent that. And maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but his moves do not seem career to me. They seem protective.
That's an interesting analysis. I like that, actually, and I would agree with you. There's Bob is really interesting. I just don't know how he played nationally. Given what he's, I mean, he is a chess player, and I think for Washington State, he's kind of our chess player. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, he's our chess player. And a number of friends of mine who are conservative and attorneys have gone up against Bob in a number of lawsuits. Some of them they've won, but this is the same thing they say is that this is a real focused guy who's got a strategy in mind and plays against it. He doesn't come across as this energetic, warm guy that I think that would play well in a presidential campaign.
Yeah, no, I think I don't see anything in his demeanor or his bearing or his speeches or his coding that in any way says that he's playing to the national stage. He's very much playing to the locals and trying to avoid having MAGA get a place where they can pick and wear us down. As I parse some of this, remember I said at the beginning, and it's true, I hear Republican and Democrat now, and I almost have to think for a minute because that's not how my brain is working at this moment in politics. We have MAGA and we have people who want to stop MAGA. Those are the two groups. That's it.
I'm giving you 2 minutes.
Yeah.
2 minutes. Tell us about Terra Firma Consulting.
Sure.
Tell us if there's anybody out there that wants to run for public office. Talk about working with the consultant, and tell us about the future.
First of all, every consulting firm does something different. Some of them have campaigns in a box where you sign up and you're immediately getting it. That's not how Terra Firma works. I had my own consulting firm for a while before Terra Firma, and I started working with Tara Nelson up in Skagit County. And Tara, just an incredible human being, a tremendous journalist, someone who can really think through problems very well, incredibly talented graphic designer, able to do web ads and all that stuff. So when we worked together a couple of times and it went well, I said, if I don't, somebody's going to hire her and I'm not going to be able to work with her anymore. So I asked her if she wanted to just start a business together, and she said yes. Our focus is on smaller races, city council, municipal stuff. We do occasional ledge races. We do occasional court races. We just did appeals court Judge Cecily Hazelrig's race. She ended up not being opposed, but I'd say that's because we helped her build such a strong sense of inevitability that she was going to win. Nobody ended up filing. But my passion is on hooking up people who may not know how to speak a political language with the political arena in such a way that they can capture the imaginations of voters. And that means hyper localizing everything. I'm one of the few consultants where if you text me, you're going to get an answer back within 10 or 15 minutes unless I'm asleep. If you call me at 3 a.m. and I hear the phone wake up and I get to the phone before I fall back asleep, I'm going to answer your phone call. And Tara's going to do the same thing, because we believe that the role of a consultant is to help qualified people get to a place where they can put their service into action. We are not policy wonks. I can't sit here and describe the 5 points of it, but if you can, and it's really boring for people, I can tell you how to talk about it in a way that's going to excite folks. That's what we do. And I am proud to do it. Right now, we are working with a couple of mayors in Snohomish County. I'm not going to embarrass them by giving their names out right here. But if you are someone who's looking to run for office, and if that sounds like something that might be useful for you, samples of our work and our philosophy are on our website, which is Terra Firma, PNW, as in Pacific Northwest, terrafirmapnw.com.
Bill, I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your insights. I appreciate your wisdom. And obviously we appreciate your stories today. So thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me. And that the Black Museum out there is just brilliant. Love it.
Called Unconscious Black History Museum. Come to the historic Columbia City Theater, 4916 Rainier Avenue South. Come learn about the history of the Black community here in Seattle. Tony B has put together a spectacular exhibit. Appreciate all of you so much. Bill, thank you very much. And until we meet again on your community radio station, RainierAvenueRadio.world.